I'm Dr. Mahathir, and this is The Centered Edge. My passion for these conversations comes from my own journey. This podcast is an effort to translate that lived experience into something meaningful and positive. Now, let's get into the episode. So let's begin. I'm Dr. Mahathir, and this is The Centered Edge. And with us today is someone who needs no introduction, the theme producer, Marina Mahathir. And I think I won't even try to give an introduction to you. You've done so many things and you're doing so many things now. Maybe I'll just let you give a brief overview of what is it that you're into right now.
Thank you, Manju, for having me this morning. I like to describe myself as a writer primarily. I've been writing a column in the Star for more than 30 years, which somewhat ages me. And I've written a memoir and I'm trying to write more books if I only had the time to do that. But that's my great love, writing. But apart from that, I run a travel website for women called safigo.com. Plus, I do a lot of work. I'm a member of Sisters in Islam. I sit on the board of Musawa, which is a global movement for justice and equality in the Muslim family. And I try and support a lot of progressive and human rights causes wherever I can.
For all this that you've done, and you've been doing it for a very long time, including Sisters in Islam. So my first question would be, because you've spoken freely about race, religion, and everything that is Malaysian, everything that's good and bad about Malaysia. If you were not who you are, if you didn't come from the family that you, do you think you would still be able to talk about all this, given how other people have been treated who've talked about the same thing?
I don't really know, actually. Like I said, I've been writing the column for more than 30 years. And in all that time, I think I've been censured maybe 3-4 times at most, which is not bad. And usually it's from the newspaper itself feeling nervous about what I'm saying. But apart from that, I've been allowed to say whatever I want. Whether it's because I'm a daughter, I don't know. But I do think I have a way of saying things that get the point across without, I try not to name names for the most part, but people know who I'm talking about. I try to be pretty diplomatic, but without compromising what I think about something or without compromising the facts of the case and all that. And I write what I feel like writing. And the fact that it resonates with a lot of people is, to me, a very lucky coincidence. I'm not trying to be the voice of the people, so to speak, or be an apologist for anyone. I can't say whether that's correct or not. I think it helps to sell the paper, so they don't mind. That's the way it's always been. I can't say for myself about that.
Have you always had strong opinions about things? And also, what do you think influences you in formulating all these opinions?
I don't think I've always had strong opinions. As a young girl, just say out of school and all that, I was just like anyone else. It really depends on what I read, what I'm exposed to. But I must say that my parents always instilled in me certain values to always be truthful. Lying was the worst thing you could do. You have to be honest. You have to be considerate of other people and help as much. They were terrific role models because I saw them actually in action doing the principles that they espoused. And they were very straight about our behavior if it happened to contradict any of these values that they put in us. And then I went off to the UK to study. And I went to university at one of the most radical universities. I went to the University of Sussex, which was one of the first red brick university, and got exposed to all sorts of things. I can't say I participated necessarily, but I joined Amnesty International. I saw some demos, and it was time the late Margaret Thatcher was about to come in. There was a lot of upheaval, people protesting about student fees at university. And so there was a lot going on, and I was aware. Again, I wouldn't say I participated in any of it, but I guess some of it seeped in. And I got some lessons in reality when I was there. That sort of exposure helped to form some of my opinions. And then I came back and I was working and I started to do some charity work, fundraising for the publication I was with. And then I got to know people working for charities, working for NGOs, and my education went on like that. It's a sort of an evolving thing. But I think it goes back to the values I was brought up with about being truthful, about being considerate of other people always. So when I see something that's not right, those principles naturally manifest themselves,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was it.
So when you came back from Sussex and you brought some of the way of thinking and the methodology of how they express themselves here. And so you've been marching on the streets, you've done all of that, you've been vocal. Was there any time that you felt a certain need to comply because you're the daughter of someone and you cannot be out on the streets, or you felt that the people in power would cramp down on these sort of protests? Did you ever feel unsafe or the need to be someone other than you?
No, I just did basically whatever I wanted. I was very surprised when my dad had already stepped down and other people came into power, and I knew some of the children, and I realized that, and they were invited to an event that I was part of. And I was surprised to find they would actually check with the father's office whether it was okay, whether what they were going to say was okay. I never did that. And I was never expected to either. I barely knew anyone in my dad's office. It just wasn't our thing. So I never felt unsafe in that way. Most of these demos happened later, right? No, I wasn't involved in the Reformasi 1998. Yeah, that would have been a bit out. And it was very confusing anyway at the time. And yeah, no, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But later on with Bersih and all that, I was part of Bersih 2, 3, 4, 5. And all the rallies for Pakatan Harapan in 2018 and all that sort of thing. And I never felt unsafe. I do feel a little bit more pressure now. And partly because everyone knows I'm a member of Sisters in Islam. There's a lot of pressure there. But also I feel like people are watching. Nothing has happened. I walk around without feeling unsafe, but I do feel more watched now than I used to.
Are you in any way afraid of that situation?
No, I'm never afraid. I have great faith in Malaysians. I think they talk a lot, but they don't actually do anything. On social media, I get all this sort of nonsense, but I've yet to meet anyone who would actually say to my face. People have been enormously kind. And I would say from all races. Just yesterday, where was I? I was coming back from my trip, and there was some people, I think we were waiting for the same train or something, and they actually took the time to say we were waiting for the bags, to ask how my dad was and all that, which was really sweet, really kind. So I never faced that. During my dad's time, when I was writing the column, I would get letters from people. I had someone who said, I know where you live, that sort of thing. But yeah, I just ignore it. I put them in the drawer and don't bother.
That's very brave.
I don't feel like we live in that sort of country, really. I know not everyone feels that way. We've had some terrible cases, forced disappearances, and that sort of thing. I should be more worried, but I must say that those were the days before social media, when people actually had to write letters and put them in an envelope, stick a stamp, and post it. So it's all a bit slow. So I think the day when I feel very unsafe in this country, the Malaysia I grew up with is gone.
On that note, you've been advocating for progressive ideas for over 30 years now, and all these liberal ideas, but As people are moving more and more towards the conservative rights, at least majority of the people, do you think that the liberal movement maybe misread the room? What happened there?
Oh, I don't think we misread the room at all. I think there's a big difference between liberal or whatever. Progressive means everybody has a chance at decent life, decent schooling, decent job, that sort of thing. That's very basic to everyone, regardless of politics, right? And I think that's what most people want, no matter what politicians say. I can't believe some of the very, very trivial things that politicians bring up thinking it's so important to us. It really isn't. But what we care about is that we feel safe every day, our kids can go to a decent school, we can earn a decent living. When people say they're getting conservative, I don't know whether it's real or not. And I don't know whether they truly understand what it means. If it means dressing up to look more conservative, but your values are still whack, what does that mean? I was reading about some mosque official who was caught watching porn, right?
Yeah.
So on the outside, on the surface, very conservative, everyone's going to be all like that. But the inside is all wrong, right? To me, I think that a lot of people live double lives. It's very performative on the outside, and the real thing is what we should care about. Yeah, so I don't think we've misread the room. I don't even think I should be speaking for everyone, but anyway, I meet a lot of young people and they like what we talk about. They like what we say because they know it's about care. We've had, for instance, very conservative people just slam sisters in Islam all day. They can organize all day seminars and whole purpose is bang. These people are terrible. And I feel like asking them, okay, fine. You don't like us, that's fine. But how do you give hope to the young Malay woman of today? How do you ensure that their future is safe, that their future is productive, that they can fulfill themselves and all that? Tell me how you do that. Just by being negative about everyone, does that help anyone? No, it doesn't. That's the way I take it.
Coming back to how politicians are, your dad had a very humble beginning, right? But a lot of politicians nowadays not necessarily come from that sort of background. So do you think the messages that they bring is removed from what the common society is or what the common society needs?
I don't know about everyone's background. My dad's father was a school teacher and he just made sure that his kids got educated. And my dad was the youngest and went on to become a doctor. Everyone knows that history. And in the old days, as far as I understand, that politicians came from backgrounds where they were often in touch with very ordinary people. So they would be teachers, a couple of doctors like my dad, people who rose up from being in touch with a lot of people and knowing their problems. Nowadays, I don't really know where they come from, but they see, and this is a generalization, I wouldn't like to say it about everybody, but I do know that some people see politics as a way of going up in life because it enables you to meet people who can make your life better, easier. So it's about themselves rather than about the people that they are serving. I think that's been the real change over the years. I think we live in an environment where getting ahead in very material terms has become very important, and service as such has become less important. And I think that's a big problem that affects everyone. And that's why some really good people just refuse to go into politics because it's there for the wrong reasons.
Going back to Sisters in Islam, they've recently had to remove Islam and they are now as forum. Was that a strategic move or was it an act of surrender where they stripped you of your identity?
Actually, we've always been Sis Forum. That's our registered name. Sisters in Islam was actually a kind of a pen name because we started off just by writing letters in newspaper. And we needed a kind of pen name. So someone said, put Sisters in Islam. So we put Sisters in Islam and it stuck. And so we tend to refer to ourselves as SIS, S-I-S, because that's like sisters and we work for the sisters. That's a thing, very feminist sort of thing. So the whole idea of having to remove the word Islam from our name was not such a biggie because it was in our nickname and not in our formal name. So, okay, so a lot of us fought against it because we felt that if we take off the word Islam from our name, it implies that what we do is not Islamic. Whereas what we're trying to do is to uphold Islamic values of justice, equality, kindness, compassion, that sort of thing. So is all that is considered un-Islamic because we're talking about it? What does that mean? But when we won the case last year, and then the Sultan of Selangor, because the case brought against us was by the Majlis Agama Islam Selangor. So that he's the head of that. So when he advised that we should take the word Islam, so that kind of put us under pressure. I was like, okay, we shall now refer to ourselves by our formal name, which is Sis Forum Malaysia. So it's not a big change.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, maybe not a big change for S4, but let's talk about a change for you because in 2014, the Selangor Fatwa labeled you as deviant. So did that?
Yeah, not me personally. Yeah, that was the case.
Yeah,
that was the case.
But since you were involved in that, did you feel like it stripped you? Because when they personally identified with you and you walk into religious programs, do you find that it strips you of your identity somewhat?
No, because these are human beings who want to label me. It is not God. I know what I believe in. I know who I'm answering to. I know the truth of what I do and what my colleagues at SIS does. So yeah, no. That's why we fought it in the civil court, because they can be challenged. And what we wanted to show is that they can be challenged. It's not our first time. The government tried to ban one of our books 2 years after it had been on the bookshelf. And it was really a report of a conference. Nobody read it unless you're an academic. But they objected to one chapter. And we fought that. And we got the book because it was very clear that actually nobody had read it. And there was no way that you would read an academic book and feel inclined to go rioting in the streets. And that was the whole thing, that, this was a threat to public order. Seriously? An academic book in English? No. So we won that case. So, we're very familiar with the courts, been in and out all the time. And this particular case with the fatwa took us a ridiculous amount of time. It took us, 11 years or something? It's taxpayers' money. Every time they go to court, they delay it, they postpone it. It's taxpayers' money, and it's basically a form of harassment of us. We are very lucky. We have lawyers who are willing to do pro bono work. There's still expenses because there are court expenses, and it takes time out. It's practically a whole day when we have to go to court. I don't know what it served in the end. And in the end, I'm very grateful that the judges were sensible and saw through the law. We were up, we went High Court Appeal, Court, Federal Court, High Court, God knows how many times on different points. And finally, we made it. So, yeah, but it's basically harassment.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of issues that you have been at the forefront of fighting. One is polygamy, for instance. Where do you think you've made strides forward? And where do you think you are still stuck or you've gone backwards with all the efforts that you've made?
Okay, let me tell you a story. My mother's father, my grandfather, Haji Muhammad Ali Taib, was a member of the Selangor Majlis Agama Islam. years and years ago. My uncles and aunts, my mother's side of the family is a very Selangor family, very close to the Sultan, also my grandpa. My grandfather was a real stickler for equality, justice and equality. He had 10 children, 7 boys and 3 girls, made sure that the girls were well educated. My mom was the youngest girl and she became a doctor and all that. So one of the things that he was very strict about was about when you marry someone that you have to honor them and you have to do right by them. With my grandma, he had 10 children. And I guess he loved her a great deal. They were great. Of course, I knew them when they were already quite old. So he pushed through, as far as I know, in the Selangor Sharia laws, enactments, state enactments, that if a man wanted to marry another one, there are certain rules he has to abide by. One is that he had to have the written signed consent of his first wife, and it had to be done in court in front of a judge. Okay, and that was so that to limit it. So that rule stood for 30-something years until someone in quite a good position of power in Selangor wanted to marry another one and managed to break that rule. And my mom was truly offended because that was her dad's rule. And I remember that time my mom could get on TV and actually say, what about the first wife? This is cruel to the first wife. I feel bad for the first wife. How would she feel? Can you imagine anyone saying that now? So once that dam broke, where this rule could be broken, it was spread like a virus. And the trouble is, because Islam is a state responsibility, so we have 13 states, so there are actually 13 different sets of Sharia rules. So some people, if they can't get what they want in one state, they just shop around and find another state. So there was a famous case of this guy who wanted to marry a very famous actress, even though he already had a first wife. The first wife was a smart woman, very educated, professional and all. She went to court, and this was in Selangor State. She went to court to challenge that, and the judge actually asked the guy, what's wrong with your first wife? And he had to admit, no, nothing actually. But what he did was he went to another state where I guess he had some ties and married the second wife anyway. So this was the problem. And our stand is not that we're against polygamy, but per se, but make sure that the wife, the first wife, very often the mother of all your children, is well protected, that her standard of living should not drop because suddenly your income has to be split in two, right? And that your children do not suffer. One of the big issues is nafkah. Nafkah is the money you give to support particularly your children. Any number of men who the court says you have to pay your first wife this much for the upbringing of your children, and they just ignore it. But nobody, we say, what is this? I really have to wonder about what sort of man is happy to see his kids suffer so that he can have another life with. We did actually, as sisters, we did a study on the impact of polygamy on first wife, second wife, and the children of both. And this was a while ago, it took forever. I think the book is just about to come out and it's probably a bit outdated. And all the people, we interviewed the men as well, basically everyone's miserable. So what is this about bringing about a happy, peaceful society? It's a formula for so much conflict, so much unhappiness. Why on earth do we do it? And people rarely talk to the children. I tell you, some of them carry the hurt, children's first wife particularly, right up to adulthood. Some of them said, I had a father who was there all the time, and suddenly I didn't have him all the time. We had terrible cases where a daughter would go to the father and say, please, can I have some money for my education, my further studies? And he says, you're for which mother again? That sort of thing. What sort of society do we have here that we allow this to happen? And in the Quran, polygamy is not about this. Polygamy is about the welfare of widows and orphans who are left in those days, on 6th century, who after wars and all that, who are left with no one to support them because women didn't work. So, bring them under the care of another man legally, and that's it. And that's the whole idea. Nowadays, women work, true, but children need schooling, that sort of thing. Why do you throw them out into the streets, pretty much?
This podcast is supported by Work. More than just a co-working space, it's an ecosystem built for human connection. So whether you're established or you're a startup, find room to grow at Work. Let's talk a little bit about feminism, because usually a good woman, I think it cuts across race, is someone who's silent, who's submissive, and you're not that.
By whose definition is that?
I guess the common world definition. And a lot of us are not like that. So do you think it's possible to be a feminist in Malaysia, particularly for a Muslim woman, and not be branded as an enemy of the faith?
I think there have been lots of feminist women going back to pre-independence. There were women who helped to lead the fight for independence, and after that were shut out, erased. You see this wonderful photos of the women home guard, in their kabaya and with the guns. Those are women being allowed to stand up for themselves and have a voice and all that. Feminism is not a new concept. I think we've always had. I attended a very interesting talk about the queens of the men. Very often they became queens because husbands died. Basically, all the men killed each other off, wanting to ascend the throne. So they were left with the women, or they were regents for male kings who were too young. But almost universally, they were regarded as very good rulers who brought good to their people and made sure they were all okay and all that sort of thing. I don't think this idea that we have to be quiet and submissive and all that is necessarily true. It's a stereotype that is perpetuated by men, a certain type of men. Just as an aside, if I can have an aside, it's a very interesting fact. You know this ICE guy, Jonathan Ross, who killed this woman, Renee Good. His wife is Filipino. Okay. The guy who killed George Floyd by sitting on his neck, basically, his wife was also Asian. They have, this type of men have this stereotype of the submissive Asian women. Yeah. And that's why they marry those women, because they think they're going to just be quiet and shut up. So it's a stereotype put by a lot of people, not just on Muslim women. Some women do buy into it because they find it advantageous, but they don't always wind up. We've seen women who are beautiful, does everything right, keeps a nice house, have beautiful children, dress well, and all that, still get left. Yeah. So what's the point? What is the point? You might as well stand up and fight for your rights. Yeah. So I don't think, I don't know whether I'm anything special in that way, a real exception, because my mom went off to study medicine on her own. She's outspoken. She's always worked. I grew up with these sort of role models. I had an aunt, Tan Sri Saleha, who's now passed, and she was really feisty. She knew everybody, and she was out there. She worked in the welfare department, and everyone knew her. And she was really tough. Like, we were more scared of Auntie Leha than anyone. But she was also a doll. She was really lovely. And there are many women like that. So this stereotype is a false stereotype, I think, that is perpetuated by people who gain from it. Yeah.
Let's expand the word feminist and feminism, because we have LGBTQ, and the T in that is not treated very nicely in Malaysia. We're not very kind to them. So do you think we should have a wider acceptance of what being feminine is, or feminist?
First of all, I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about feminism, as I explained earlier. Also, that feminism has a dirty word because it's seen as coming from the West, and it's seen as yet another colonial imposition on us.
Yeah.
And feminists in our part of the world, in Malaysia, in Asia, in the Muslim world, we have our own issues about that. We do not take everything from those women. We also have problems with them trying to tell us what to do, because everything has to be based in our reality, in our culture and everything. So this is why, like at Sisters Musawa, we call ourselves Muslim feminists based on our own values. The values, we don't compromise on justice, equality, human rights, etc. We do not compromise on that. But we do not need to take everything on from these white feminists, because they can be just as colonial-minded as anyone. Put that away.
It's true.
But regarding the T in LGBT, in Asia, and there are lots of historical accounts of this, lots of research, that we have never had an issue with trans people. And it's almost part of our culture. I really think that this new discrimination, hatred, violence against trans people, number one, is a Western import, right? Again, you accuse us of taking on Western ideas. A lot of other people are doing this too, and labeling it Islamic. It is, we've always had them. And the thing is, they're being attacked because they're visible, but they're also human beings. They can't help themselves. Do you know that once upon a time in Malaysia, people who felt that they have been born in the wrong sex could actually change it through an operation, could actually change their name and sex in our IC, and could get married. There's a famous case. I just spoke to the very first Muslim woman, a trans woman, who got married by the imam in her state. She now lives abroad because she had worked abroad, but she was a trans woman who got married to a man. And I've spoken to a lot of older trans women who have been married, and when they first wanted to get married, they were a bit nervous. It's okay. And they went to an imam and said, is it okay because I'm trans? And the imam said, what does it say in your IC? So, oh, the IC says I'm a woman. I said, then what's the problem? And the other thing, that in my years working in HIV, one of the misconceptions about a lot of the trans people, LGBT people altogether, is that they are irreligious. They are going against religion. I remember there was a kind of a convention of trans people during my time in when I was at Malaysian AIDS Council. And they came out with a bunch of resolutions, like any conference. And what was the first one? How to pray. It was very important to them, because Muslim ones, when they go into a mosque, where do they pray? They go to the men's part, they get harassed. And then the women's part, they feel like they're not really welcome there. Where do they go? That's why in Indonesia, one trans community started a trans mosque. Religion is important to them. So to say that they have discarded religion is so untrue. And I wish there was better understanding of this, instead of all this harassment and violence. Have you
anyone in your family ever been pressured, not necessarily as you grow older, but usually that's the case, to wear the hijab?
My family? No.
Not by your family, I mean towards you and your family.
Oh, yeah. My mom used to get in, said, oh, we really admire you and all, but why don't you wear? Sometimes he goes to religious events, and of course she wears. And my mom goes, oh, how sweet. The whole idea is not about being sweet or pretty, that sort of thing, but she feels now I'm myself wherever I am, and without having to show what and I don't need to have any outer show of my faith. I just don't. I'm the same wherever I go. I know some people who wear it here and then go overseas and take it off. So I don't understand that at all. And some people, one day they wear, one day they don't. I also don't understand that. But it's up to them. Really, you do what you want. I make no judgment. And I have no issues about any of that.
You've been writing musings for a long time in the newspaper, but you've not been doing that now. And was there an article that broke the camel's back?
No. I am still writing. I had one on Sunday. Actually, and I've got to look it up.
Okay.
The thing was, I used to do it every 2 weeks on a Thursday in the early days.
Okay.
Which is fine, but it's also a lot of pressure. 2 weeks goes by really fast. I think 2017, thereabouts, or 2018, I asked them, I said, I want to go on sabbatical. I know, I'm just tired. And I want to go, and I was going off to do my master's and that sort of thing. So I needed a break. I didn't want to have the pressure of having to produce every 2 weeks. Fine, they said, okay. And then when I came back, I said, can I have it again? They said, the space is used up. So the only space we have for you is on Sunday once a month.
Okay.
So I do it on the last Sunday of every month, which is a bit less pressure. The only trouble with columns is that you need to be topical, and sometimes a month is a long. I get a column published, and the next day something big happens. And I have to wait a month. That's a bit of a problem, but I'm still there. The problem is time has changed. The newspaper has gone from print to online. Online, you need a subscription. So really the only people I feel like read me now are the people who read it in print. They tend to be old. My late uncle, Don Hashim, was about the only one I knew who really read it regularly, because he gave me a comment. Message me like, okay, that was okay. I agree with you. And I don't know whether, I'm sure my readership has dropped because Malaysians don't really like to pay for subscriptions. And so they're not reading it.
But when you do write, do you find increasingly in today's Malaysia, you have to self-censor your articles?
100% censor.
With the newspaper do the newspaper censor you?
Like I said, in 30 over years, they've done it to me maybe 4 times, usually just before election. They want me to tone it down. I said, I don't know how to tone down. I write what I want and you do what you want with it. It's not my job to tone down for you just because you're scared.
Are you aware that there's a lot of fake advertisements and that's out there that uses your face, uses faces of a lot of people?
I know. People send it to me and it's so annoying. They're scams.
Yeah.
I hope people realize that they are scams. I'm just tired of doing anything about it. There are also WhatsApps going around of articles purportedly written by me.
Okay.
Saying things which I know I would never say. There's something about Hang Tuah being Chinese and all that. I'm not a historian. I'm not an archaeologist, or I don't know. But anyone who's followed me through the years will know my style. And if you read it, you know it's not my style. I don't use caps a lot, like Donald Trump. I think when people don't have much to say, they put them in caps just to get people's attention. That's not me at all. So I'm just tired. This thing keeps popping out like a bad penny every few years.
Let's talk a little bit about your work with HIV. People always wanted to help the innocent HIV babies, but not so much the dirty parents or the dirty sex workers. How has your work with HIV patients progressed? And do we still have in 2026 this untouchable category of people?
Only among the ignorant. I have to say that I stepped down as president of Malaysian AIDS Council in 2005. So more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But people still associate me with HIV. I'm now the patron of the AIDS Foundation. And I told them I don't want to do any work. I just want to be decorative. You have an event, I'll dress up and come. That's it. But I think there has been significant progress from the time that I was there, because in the early days, people really didn't know much. It was very quiet. And I think what we did in those early days was bring it out into the public sphere so people talk about it, whether it was positive or negative. But we did some great things, which is we got the government to provide free first-line medicine to Malaysians, with HIV. We stopped the mother-to-baby transmission and all sorts of things. And once you get treatment in, you stop this whole talk about it being incurable. It becomes manageable. And we keep pointing out, nobody's cured the common cold. Nobody's really cured diabetes either. It's a lifelong disease which you have to manage. It's the same. I know people with HIV who have survived more than 20 years in Malaysia. And that's because of the work we did. And now I go to the Red Ribbon Gala, the Malaysian AIDS Foundation's premier fundraising event. And I see all these celebrities getting up and singing for them and all that. In my day, when we started, no one would touch it. They were so scared of it. I see all these companies donating and associating themselves with it. My day, nobody wanted to do it. That was the prejudice at the time. So there have been significant moves towards it. But undoubtedly on a day-to-day level, for people who have HIV, they're still scared. But we try to emphasize there is treatment. You can live a good, productive, healthy life if you get diagnosed early, you get into the treatment program early. It is possible. And it's not completely gone, I would say, but it is there. But the trouble is when people associate, for instance, we've had, for some weird reason, police raids on HIV workshops in certain states because it's specifically for the community of men who have sex with men. Hey, that's a vulnerable community. We have to educate them about HIV. But if you raid them and then give them a bad name, put it in the papers, that's not going to help. That's only going to create the prejudice, the discrimination, and everything. I don't know why people do things. We are doing very practical things for the good of the country. And you're doing what you think are good things for very amorphous reasons. Which one do we want? So that's been that problem when people insist that to make headlines or something by doing this sort of very negative things.
Talking about things that we cannot talk about, condom usage is still something that we don't talk about, yet we have high teen pregnancies. Should we really focus on changing the teen mindset or start talking about condom or start doing it in tandem?
We have to do it all. We have to have better sex education in schools. That's the main way of preventing all these teen pregnancies, because a lot of young people are growing up with no knowledge of how it all works even and how to prevent it. And it's a lot of what we call unmet need, that a lot of health clinics will not provide contraception to women who are unmarried, who are young. And then you complain about teen pregnancies, abandoned babies. Which do you want? So there are ways of preventing all this. It just takes the will to do it. And young people needs to be told in very frank terms. Because, hey, you get pregnant too young, you're going to pretty much ruin your life. Besides ruining your body, you can't go to university, you can't get a job, etc. The other thing that we work on at Sisters in Islam is child marriage. Been trying to raise the age of marriage to 18, because right now it's 16 for girls, and it can even be lower. We've had 10, 11-year-olds. And yet there's no will to change this because it's supposed to be cultural, according to some people. In some states have raised it to 18. I think Selangor has done that. I think Kedah might have done that. I'm not sure. Again, we have to get it approved in 13 states is the problem. But some countries, Muslim countries, have just done it and say no, that age of marriage is 18 and that's it. So anyone younger than that have to be fined and all that. Of course, you have to look at the reasons, and sometimes poverty is a big reason, and then you have to deal with that.
You are Datin Paduka. You've traveled a lot. You've highly educated. Was there any point in your advocacy days where you realized, oh gosh, I was wrong about that issue that has to do with B40? Was there ever a disconnect?
I'm sure there was. I think I've been lucky that I've always been guided by the values I was brought up with. And I'm very open to being educated. So, for instance, when I first joined AIDS Council, AIDS Foundation and AIDS Council, I grew up protected, very establishment. And then here I was hanging out with drug users, sex workers, trans people, all sorts of people. But I thought of myself, these are the people that I'm supposed to serve. And to do that properly, I have to learn from them. And I learned from all of them. I learned what their lives are like, why they even went into. Nobody chooses to go into sex work for fun. That is a real misunderstanding of the whole thing. And I remember Jack Singh. Jack Singh was the very first HIV positive person who came out in public. And he educated me a lot. I would write in a newspaper and I would talk about AIDS sufferers. And he would call me up and say, Marina, no, you do not say AIDS sufferers. You say people living with, because we're not all going around miserable and like that. We're not. We are trying to live as best as we can. And you have to be correct and positive about it. So I said, okay, I will change it. Mind you, I had to correct Jack too. Naming other people. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that I learned. And drug users, I would sit with them and I would find, wow, these are actually extremely intelligent people. Why did they get into drugs is another thing altogether. It's something else that happened. It's a real pity. It's a waste of talented people for our country. So I hope that in all that time, I didn't make too many mistakes. I learned, and because I travel, I went to a lot of conferences. I met a lot of people working in the same field all over the world. AIDS was just brilliant for me because it covered everything. It didn't just cover health and medicine. It was also about economics. It was human rights. It was politics. It was religion, whatever. It was perfect for me because I'm a Gemini with a short attention span. So I need to move. I get bored easily. So on to the next. And so it served me very well. And I always say this, AIDS, I'm always grateful too, because the me that started in 1993 and the me that left in 2005, two different people. A much more evolved person at the end of it because of HIV/AIDS.
Let me ask the Gemini you, after 30 years, are you exhausted or what's next?
I think I would like to say, I am exhausted actually. My dream is to just retire and write and travel. That's all I want. But I can't seem to do it. And I suspect it's a little bit genetic. It's hard to, not to let go. I'd be happy to let go if I found someone who could take over things. But I'm having to learn how to say no more. because it's hard, and I gotten to the point that maybe I should be kinder to myself and not take on too much. So I'm learning to say no. It's hard. I can't complain about not having time to do this, that, and the other, when at the same time I'm saying yes to everything. So yeah, that's my wish at the moment. Yeah.
We've actually reached the top of the hour, but I have a lot of things that I still need to ask you. Hopefully, another episode. Here's the question that I ask all my guests who come on the show. And I think it's more meaningful to ask you, if you had one wish to make the planet a better place, what would it be?
I think I would like more sensible people. And by that, I generally mean sensible women to take over the world. Because I think there's so many men, and I don't say that all men are like this, but somehow the ones that get into that position where they can control our lives, they can control the planet, they are the worst kinds. And they're basically destroying it. I know so many people who are just depressed about the state of things. And you wonder why, if you destroy the entire planet, it's left. Even if you get to the top of the heap and you have all this power and the world is in pieces, what's the point of it? I think if we can make the world a safe, comfortable place for everyone, isn't that better? Everyone will love you. Now you do this and you think people love you, but they don't. They hate you. So, yeah, I'm hoping for more common sense.
Yeah, that's a tall order.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marina, for being on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome.
Well, thank you for joining me at The Edge. Now, the stories and opinions shared by my guest are theirs alone. They are raw, personal, and do not necessarily reflect my own views or professional stance. I present these dialogues as lived realities, not absolute truth. It's for you to examine, challenge, and interpret. Like any investigation into the human condition, the evidence is laid bare. What you take away from it is entirely up to you. Once again, this podcast is supported by Work. Work is not just a co-working space, it's an ecosystem built for human connection. So whether you're an established entity or a startup, find space to grow at work. Okay, be sure to turn on the notification bell icon for this podcast. And here's a surprise. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And if you do all four, that's a mystery gift potentially waiting for you. I am Dr. Manju Apadure. Until the next time, stay centered, but keep your edge.